Hi, welcome to Brand Matters podcast. Here we discuss with our guest on how to create strong and meaningful brands. Today I have a guest who describes himself as a brand strategist, composer, and a postmodern philosopher. Today I have a privilege to welcome Yuri Negrebetsky, Associate Strategy Director at Interbrand. Yura, welcome.
Hello.
Yuri, your background is fascinating. It's a mix of strategy, music, and philosophy. How do these different disciplines shape your approach to brand building?
I graduated from Moscow Conservatory years ago, so that was kind of my first big thing in life. I graduated from Moscow Conservatory as a composer. And very quickly I became a marketing specialist. I got to branding agency, I think 17 years ago, so right after I graduated. And I got married very quickly. My daughter was about to appear, so that was a logical step, because with music composition, especially at avant-garde wing, where I was part of, it was very hard to find a job that will help you to be a father and a good husband, actually. Then, suddenly I discovered that these two things have a lot in common. I mean, brand creation and composition. It's still about composition, isn't it? In music, you take raw idea or even pause or some concept and build meaning around it with the help of sounds and notations. And in branding, it's the same. Products, values, ambitions, you are digging inside the company's tools and raw data and some ideas in the heads of top managers, and you turn it into something people want to be part of. There's a lot in common in reality.
I love how you described it, and actually how you used the word to compose the brand. Maybe you should rename yourself from brand strategist to brand composer.
Yeah, and orchestrate the brand strategist, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. Let's come to Interbrand. Interbrand is known for its very rigid and strict methodology. How the work in Interbrand is different from your previous experience that you had in Russian agencies like Tigers and Moulin Love, etc.
Russian school of branding is way different to the Western school. This happened because of in the West world, branding is part of the market for decades already. In Russia, it emerged in early 19th, and actually it was first endorsed by advertising agencies, and advertisers were the ones who created first brands in Russia. And that is the reason why people in branding in Russia were usually coming from advertising world with advertising background. And in here, usually the people coming to branding, they are coming from universities and they are studying branding in the university. They're coming from theory, and advertising it's a practice. So the great difference is that in Russia, you think through experience that brand will have with customers, with audiences. And you think through human lenses a lot more than here. Here it's more about brand economics. It's more about business, and business lenses is way more important than human lenses.
Wow, super interesting. I'm sure when you moved from Moscow to London, there was a lot of differences, as you described, from the lenses, the perspective, the advertising school in Moscow, while in the UK it's more related to business and it's much more older. Were there any culture shock when you start working at Interbrand, or what was your biggest learning from transitioning from Moscow to learning?
Quite interesting, but I expected to have a big cultural shock, and that was my first move actually to the different country. In Russia, I spent 5 years in Moscow basically, and the last 6 years I spent at my own agency, Tigers Moscow it was called. And when I moved here, the main shock was, I think, related to the fact that I'm moving from my own studio to like corporation back to be part of some corporate lifestyle. But I spent a lot of years at BBDO and this kind of agency, so it was kind of very familiar to me. And I was surprised that there's no big difference in terms of culture, in terms of how agencies are operating across the globe, actually. So it's completely different environment, which is very specific to agencies as the entity across the globe. And that was, I think, quite surprising to me. But the thing that still is kind of a bit different is, for example, when in Russia you say something, you mean it. right? So for example, you want to meet person after the work for drinks, and here you are, you're sitting in a bar and drinking something. And in here, usually when people say, let's have a drink sometime, they says that it was a pleasant conversation, but we will never see you again. So this is something really interesting. I'm still kind of trying to understand how it works.
Interesting. Let's talk about the branding. I mean, brand creation and brand strategy and brand implementation, it's about consistency from one part. On the other part, I mean, everything is changing so fast right now on the world, in the business, and economics. So does Interbrand, or does your own perspective, do you still believe in timeless brand positioning and, consistency at all cost? Or has it evolved to, adaptive branding, and the branding and the strategy should adapt to the challenges around us?
Yeah. It's a good one, really. And actually, coming back to the question around the difference between Russian market and Western market, I think it shows how Russian market is different, because Russian market is all about adaptability, and the brand that endorse agility and adaptability, they can gain more credibility across the audiences. When in here, it's more about stability and, as you said, timeless solutions. But still, it's changing, and I see an Interbrand is also kind of moving towards the middle, I guess, between being timeless and being adaptable. So brands strive to fill this, zeitgeist of time. But I would say that such brands, such companies as Interbrand, they work with huge brands, the global brands, and sometimes they value more, ability of brand consultants is to reduce risks, rather than, because adaptability is something that requires a bit more risk resilience to risk. So it's a completely different mindset, and that's where the clash comes in. Interbrand wants to be more adaptable and to create more adaptable strategies, but clients want to have more rigor and stable outcomes. So that's how currently they're trying to balance these two things. But I believe that the solution is, again, somewhere in the middle. Too many global companies still think branding is the kind of theme that will help you to gain more, to more balance. But a brand should be able to look radically different in how it engages with culture, yet instantly recognizable in what it stands for. So, yeah.
That's super interesting. And this is actually my pain point. And I want to ask the next question about being the global or local, especially for the brands that exist in different markets. I mean, there are two schools on that. One school is P&G school, which says basically, look, guys, it's all about the global positioning, global advertising frames, and you just do a small adaptation, or actually you don't need any adaptation. You just take a global asset and run it. Then another school is a Unilever school. It says, look, guys, the product, the benefit is more or less the same, but how you communicate, it's up to you on the local market. And both schools are, effective. What's the Interbrand's point? What is your personal point on how to manage this global versus local for the brands that exist in multiple markets?
I remember those early days at BBDO in Moscow, when I was part of some briefing from Wrigley's, I guess. And Interbrand was doing a new brand strategy for Wrigley's, and they were sharing some shiny, beautiful ideas around how globally Wrigley should now stand and communicate. And I've seen the creative directors at BBDO, and they were doing like this, saying that, all right, we have to do now more job, because it's about Interbrand with Wrigley. They were communicating this global idea that should be universal, but in reality, you know that it doesn't work this way. It was the same with sneakers, for example, with Unity when you're hungry. It was such a pain to find the relevant interpretation of this locally, when globally the headquarters, they require to be in the framework, to stay in the framework. And what I've seen that usually with a thing that can be localized effectively, it shows better results, way better results. And it might, so it's, yes, to the question about adaptability, I think modern brand strategies and modern identities, visual identities, they should adopt this ability to be not very rigorous. They should be flexible. They should able to create the distinctive brand expression, but still being able to localize. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely. So that's the biggest challenge, I guess, the most complex thing in our work, to to find this way, how to do this. So I'm more about, I work with both, and P&G and Unilever, and I guess the Unilever approach is more actual to the present world. But we'll see how it goes. No one is 100% sure about anything at the moment.
Absolutely. I loved your Wrigley example. I mean, you worked with major global brands, Coca-Cola, Toyota, Mars, Unilever, P&G. It's always fun to talk about mistakes. What is the biggest mistake the big brands or big corporations make when they try to reinvent or adapt themselves too much?
Well, the biggest mistakes I've encountered working with these global brands, I think I mentioned again, right? So this, because global brands, big brands, they usually have a very diverse marketing, very diverse management teams. So even with a very bright and interesting brand strategy at place, sometimes it ends up with a very practical things like budgets and commitments, internal politics. So that's usually the thing with these global brands, even if the idea is to really make the difference. So usually they focus, sometimes, not usually, but sometimes they tend to focus on the surface instead of the substance, or the substance just doesn't come out from these small rooms and meeting rooms and discussions. Sometimes global brands, they use branding to signal that we're changing, we're doing some new stuff, but brand refresh is meaningless if the company behind it hasn't actually changed. And this requires change in management basically as well, in the way company thinks and the way it does the things internally basically. So real innovation starts from within, I believe. Business models, culture, product relevance, if those things don't change, a brand refresh is just an aesthetic exercise. And too many global companies still think branding is a shortcut to reinvention when it should be the final step in a deeper strategic shift. And yeah, that's usually the case.
Loved it. You're from Russia originally. I'm from Russia originally. We know some Russian brands which only exist in Russia. Is there any Russian brands that you think could genially succeed on a global level? And if yes, what brands it is and why?
Yeah, I think there are lots of Russian brands that can succeed actually. What I found interesting about knowledge in the West about Russian market is usually that they, except of the oil companies, no one knows what actually happens there. And Russia is great for its digital environment, digital world, and IT services. I think it's the best. IT industry is one of the best in the world in Russia.
Agree.
So yeah, absolutely. It's, I think the track it was heading to before 2022 was global dominance of major Russian digital brands. And I think most of them, like what happened with Kaspersky, for example, now it's under sanctions, but it really had this already global presence in many countries. I hope that sometime in future, they will still have opportunity to give people across the globe this ability to use the services in the same way as we used to use them in Russia when being in Moscow, because it's completely different experience, user experience. In London, for example, and I heard this from many people who moved to different countries and cities in Europe, for example, that they really miss these Russian services and Russian digital IT things that were just that became just part of our life, daily routine, and we couldn't even imagine that we live the way we live because of them, actually. So they play a huge part in our daily lifestyle. And taxi, delivery, banking, anything, it's just crazy what Russian companies do. We can say about Yandex, we can talk about other services, but there's too many of them.
No, I agree. And that's completely my reflection as well. When I moved to the UK 5 years ago, I understood how we were spoiled in Russia by the level of digitalization of every services, from banking to taxi to grocery to even the government services that provide us the full digitalization of what we've done. Because I remember I was trying to open the bank account in London, and the bank brands, they're amazing. They look fantastic. The logo is polished. The materials are fancy, but you come in and you're back in 19th century where you need to provide a lot of papers, no application works, etc. And you're like, wow, big kudos to, I think, Russian IT companies. And I think why it happened is that Russia didn't have that legacy. Basically, Russian companies, they started from scratch and they asked themselves, okay, if we do a perfect product experience, digital product experience, how it would be. So I think if we would take Russian digital products, combine it with the Western world of branding, that would be probably the best combo. I think this is how Revolut was actually born.
Exactly.
We just reinvented Revolut with you on this.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think this is definitely something we can transform from Russia to different countries.
And Myra, for example, Myra is also another example of
great example. The guys from Perm, yeah, they've done a fantastic product, and now it's an international one. I agree completely. AI. Everybody talks about AI. I mean, AI is transforming every industry. How is AI transforming brand strategy, and where do you think AI will help, and where AI will not be able to substitute us humans in brand strategy?
Yeah. Well, I think I won't be unique here, but I'm using AI every day actually, and I won't be unique in in this idea that it's amazing. I mean, those services that emerge at the moment, they just so helpful in analyzing data, in predicting trends, and optimizing campaigns. It's already amazing, doesn't imagine. And I believe in 1 year, in 2 years, it will be even better. It will tell you the best time to send an email, the most effective color, right, for CTA button. Or what type of content your audience is engaging with. But it's still terrible, and I hope so. It will remain terrible at originality. Actually, AI can remix the past, but it can't invent something that breaks the pattern at the moment. Maybe it changes sometime in the future. It will change, but still, I think it doesn't work in the same way as our human brains work, because it predicts. It works as a predictive model, and it combines the data that most it thinks will appear in the next sequence of words, right, in the sentence. And we work a bit in a different way, our brains work. And our irrational approach is something that AI can't understand. It can't use it. It can, again, use what already was done by our brains before, even if it's irrational ideas. It can use them and can create something that seems to be rational, but it's still not about creativity in the end. So I think in future we will see maybe brand strategists. There will be less of the brand strategists. The only good ones will remain. Only those who can really understand what it's inside people's brains, because again, that's what AI still can do. It can analyze what people are doing, how they search, how they buy things. But what happens inside their brains, it won't be able to do. What we can with the help of empathy. I think that brand strategists will have to evolve this ability to be empathetic to a great extent. So those brand strategists that will use it, will master it, they will still remain in our profession.
The moment AI will become as empathetic as we are humans, we're doomed.
Yes,
we are
exactly.
humans. So yeah, hopefully empathy is something they cannot take from us yet. Maybe it's a matter of time.
Yes.
But what tools do you use and how do you use? What AI agents do you use? I mean, I love, for example, playing with ChatGPT, of course, crash testing different concepts. Like, for example, when I was preparing for this podcast, I actually gathered a lot of data about you and said, look, here's Yuri, here's his background, and here's my podcast. And he gave me a pretty good list of questions. I polished a little bit, but some questions that I use right now is actually being generated by ChatGPT. And I also love the new module from Gemini, from Google. It's the deep research. And if you formulate right the research, for example, I was actually researching the effectiveness of global and local advertising concept. And it actually gave me it analyzed 74 different sources, different sites. And then it gave me a very interesting analytics is that, look, very much, as you said, it very much depends. If the brand is globally present and if it's about consistency, go for a global framework. If the brand is new and it's about local adaptation, go for local. And he said basically there's no black and white in there. And it was a deep research. It was like 10 pages of research, which probably took me a week to do, and it took it 15 minutes to do. So what agents and how do you use that?
Well, the same as you. ChatGPT is my assistant, my friend. I recently read an article about how people are using AI agents as partners, not only as assistants, but as real partners, friends, and even lovers. So that's crazy thing. But I'm not using to
Not
this
yet
extent.
in this level.
Yes, exactly. ChatGPT is very useful in the way you mentioned it. So I also to fit it with some preliminary thing I thought about. For example, I have some idea, and I'm trying also to use it as a sparring partner, just to see what it thinks about my ideas and to hone down something. Because actually in strategy and in creativity, it's very important to have someone as a sparring partner, someone to speak to. So that what I really lacked before in many projects when I'm like solo strategist. You always have to get out of your cozy environment in your brains and have someone who can really show you what's right, what's not. But the problem with ChatGPT, for example, is that it tends, if it has memory on, switched on the mode, then it tends to know you to a greater level than yourself, and it tends to give back to you yourself, basically. And that's the thing you have to be cautious of. So sometimes it starts to mirror your thinking. And Gemini is an advanced model. It's also kind of very helpful, as you said. It's so advanced in terms of analytics, and I also love it. And one more tool which I'm currently, playing with, it's Node ML from Google also. So it's really, and I think you'd love it because it has ability. You can fit, for example, you're researching on some very complex thing, right? I don't know, risk consultancy, for example, risk engineering, and you know nothing about it. So there's a new project for you, and you find some useful data, reports, podcasts as well, and you fit everything into this model, and then it creates the personal learning track for you. So you can learn it in a very fast way and a very easy way, and you also can turn on the podcast mode. So you hear two people talking about this subject. And you can even chime in or say, wait a moment, what did you say about prevention of risks? And they, oh, yes, that's a great question. Thanks for chiming in. And they will elaborate on that. So completely crazy stuff and very useful.
How this called? It's called Note?
Note ML.
ML, yeah, so Note and machine learning. Amazing. Thanks, Yuri. I never heard about it. We'll definitely play tonight with this. That's interesting. Let's go to another topic that's really kind of hot for me right now, which kind of gives me a lot of thinking and sleepless nights. It's about brand purpose. And I mean, I've read a lot of researches, and one of the research is actually from Interbrand that shows statistically that brands that has purpose, they perform better. They perform better in terms of business, etc. How for the brand to find the brand purpose, and mostly important, how to activate it, and how to ensure that it's a genuine and it's a really purpose that strikes the not just the minds but the hearts of the consumers?
Well, that's a $1 million question, I guess. And again, I think I will give you some feel of how it happens in at Interbrand. But there's a really great thing about Interbrand's methodologies that, coming back to this timeless thing, is that we are thinking basically about brand strategy. And what I really loved about this approach is it's actually a strategy. What we usually forget about, we usually think about brand strategy as something that you can put on the website or on the brief, and there's some essence and there were some words, and so this is what the brand, but it's in reality it's the strategy that helps you to understand how you achieve business goals, where you are at the moment and where you're going to. It's that is simple as that, but strategy helps you to understand how you reach these goals in future. That's actually what the strategy is. It's not some interesting idea, and a sexy wording, but it's about the trajectory. And what in this mental model, purpose plays the role of timeless northern star thing. So if this trajectory operates in the time, you think about the time because you have in 5 years to gain these kind of results, and this brand will help you. But all of this only can operate when you understand what is your timeless thing. that you are moving towards. I believe in modern world, it's more than ever is very important to understand what you're doing with your company for people apart from earning money for your stakeholders. And when the brand, the company can really find the answer on this question in their souls, actually. And that's the same difficult question. If I'll ask you, for example, Misha, what is your mission? What do you want to achieve in your life? What is one thing that you will not regret about, on your last day of life? It's as difficult as that, I guess, because this is something the company they're built of people, right? They're built of communities, and they also endorse the same things as we individually endorse. Have this a beautiful example of one of the first Christian apostles or messengers, Pavel, right? Mm-hmm. He was first known for different thing. He was known as Savel. He was a Roman citizen, and his work was to work in to actually follow Christians, right? To follow the new religion that was emerging, and he was about to understand how it works and to actually stop it to some extent. And then something has changed in his mind. He suddenly became Christian, and he changed his name. He became Pavel, not Savel. And his mission changed. So it's the same thing with the companies when they can't change the vision, they can't change the purpose. If they change them, then they change the way the company is operating, the way the business is a completely different business. So yeah, sorry for being very philosophical here, but
no, it's very beautiful. Yeah. This is where your philosophical part. I mean, we've had a composer part, and now we have the philosophical part blossoming. Where do you think the purpose should be born? Is it something that born in the workshops with an agency, etc., or is it something that the founder or CEO, or is it so where is the pure purpose is born, and how to formulate it? And how to activate it. I know it's another $1 million question.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's make it at least $100,000 answer.
Sure. No problem. Easy. So there's a great difference in the company you're working with, in the scale of company you're working with. The global brands, they have, Exco, Steerco, and CEO and founders might already be somewhere on, on the island, and they already sold their business and etc. Right? I don't know. So it's one thing. A completely different thing when the company is still run by founder or founders. It's the different thing. And usually with the second option, it's not that it's easier, but still usually this purpose-driven thing is coming from the minds and hearts of those who created the business. Because actually, where else, right? So they create the business, they sparked. It's some time ago, they had some idea, they wanted to bring something to the world, they wanted to do something, and that is what, that's what interesting. What was there? What was in their mind? And so the work of brand strategists and actually this team is really to get deeper in their souls and their minds and try to expose this and formulate this. So that's one answer.
Loved it.
One part of the story.
Loved it, yeah.
And the completely different thing when you're working with is, broad teams, broad hierarchy of management, because that's when it gets more tricky. And usually when you see the purposes from these, huge companies, they usually are not very purposeful, I would say. They're generic. We want to make world better. We want to, actually they're all saying the same thing, that they want to make the world better. So the question is only how they're doing this. Sometimes it's a bit different, but still usually not. And I believe that that's a really question for myself as well. How can we work with these companies and really find the value, the purpose that will be true to the business in this mode? Actually, I'm not sure. And how we see the world at the moment and the global companies sometimes are changing their minds on the purpose things as well. What we've seen recently with Meta, for example, right? With DI, things that were that everyone thought that are timeless, but apparently not. So this is something that is not very, and by the way, despite the founder is still in the chair, right? He's still in the business. Despite this thing, they are changing a bit the way they see their purpose. So that's a question. I really don't know at the moment. And my approach is to really still the same, find something unique that was in the foundation of this business. And it somehow still drove the best of this business for years. So you really have to dig into the story of this company. You really have to, again, activate empathy, but not to the external audiences, but to the management and to the employees, to the people who delivered business growth for years. Sorry, again, this is a bit philosophical thing, but it's the way it is.
No, and I love that you kind of separated the companies from where the founder is still active and present and the companies which are already run by the management. It's different frameworks. I also love the way how to dig still on what was the DNA that sparked the idea. And then I think the meta example is also very interesting because I think how they formulate the purpose is they want the world to be more connected, but then it's about the values that they had and now they change because of the new agenda which comes from the Trump. And then the question to Meta, guys, can you change the values? Probably something that you shouldn't change is the values and purpose on the go, as you said, then because then it's not the values and purpose if you can easily change it. So I think consistency in purpose is something that is super critical, but only after you really dig and find what really truly mattered or matters to you besides the profit. So yeah, I think
exactly.
It was a beautiful set. Coming to an end, and we talked about AI, we talked about purpose. Let's talk about the future. Let's say future is very now dull, I would say, or not dull, but very foggy. Foggy, that's the word. Very foggy. So let's talk about the future. What's, you think, the biggest change or shift in branding or brand strategy that is no one talking about yet, or very few people see? Something that we'll see and realize in 3 to 5 years, but still not obvious today. What's something that will happen there?
I think there's lots of things because we're living in a time of real unpredictable changes in marketing and branding, and it comes from not only from political scene, but also from how from culture is changing. Actually, the politics is the expression of changes in culture. This right-wing, wind is not that people are getting more right, I guess, but it's more about that people want to understand what's the actual agenda at the moment. Because for years we lived in some concepts of the world, then it's changed again, and now it's changing almost every year. So we as human beings, we're not adapted to at the moment to these kind of changes, to these kind of mental changes. It's very hard for us to process. That's why we see these jumpings of politics. And actually Trump case, I think it's a provocation for ourselves in terms of what's the next thing? What's our point of the humanity, of where it goes to the positive, to the positive ideas that these provocations, they usually help to find something. It's the fresh wind in the system, despite it might be a very unpleasant thing and not something we wanted to, but it's what they say when they want you to get out of your comfort zone. Exactly what it is. So this, change of culture and mindset from one hand, and AI and this technology thing on the other hand, we actually don't know how to create timeless things in the future, as we, building on what we discussed before. That's a great question. Digging a bit deeper to AI, I think about what happens when AI replaces human decision making. I believe will happen in some future. We assume branding is about influencing people, but soon it will be about influencing AI as well, because AI will become our kind of not only agent, but we will just ask AI to buy something for us, and it knows what we like. How will brands influence this agent to buy something new? What will be the way towards AI agents? I don't know actually the answer to this.
Wow. What I think, from what I hear from you, is the biggest challenge for all of us in future is how to stay human in a broad way. Because I think the biggest challenge, as you say, is the humanity as the concept. Because, I mean, we're not doing good there. Probably humanity needs some rebranding there as well. That's the first part. And of course, the AI and the digitalization on steroids is another kind of challenge, or where the human is. But I still believe that, as you said, that the human, the empathy, is something that the strong brand will strive for, and especially the genuine empathy and being genuinely human to one human. Because at the end of the day, people need people, and human needs another human, not just an eye. And I think this is a perfect ending for us, Yur, because I think this is the high philosophical mountain that we just climbed, and it's better to stay there. Thank you so much for being with me. For those of you who listen to us, and if you liked it, please put your stars, like, comments, because this is what makes our podcast visible in all the platforms. Thank you, Yura.
Thank you, Misha.
Goodbye.
Bye.